All right, everybody. Before we start on our read aloud today, I want to read a couple of paragraphs from a read aloud that we read earlier. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from our myth about Hercules or Heracles. King Eurystheus smiled at the large man in the lion skin who stood before his throne. Hercules, said the king, I have another labor for you to attempt or to try. I want you to bring me the 3 golden apples of the Hesperides. This startled even Hercules. But your majesty, those 3 magical sisters live beyond any land to which humans have ever traveled. According to the stories, in the middle of their garden is a tree from which there grow apples of real gold. The sisters keep the location secret, for otherwise people would constantly trample the place just to get to the gold. How am I to bring you these apples if no one even knows where they are or if they exist? What was special about those apples? Were they regular apples? No, they were golden apples. That the sisters kept the location of secret, so people wouldn't trample their land. Why do you think King Eurystheus wanted those apples? Why did he want those golden apples? Today, we're going to hear a little bit more about those magical golden apples. The title of our read aloud today, we had to squish it at the very bottom, is Atalanta and the Golden Apples. As I'm reading our story today, listen carefully to see what role those golden apples play in this Greek myth. Before I start reading, as always, I'm going to go over our vocabulary words, my friends. Skilled. Skilled means gifted and able. Even at 10 years old, Manuel was a skilled musician. Tremendously. Tremendously means greatly or enormously. The circus was Zari's favorite place, and she always enjoyed it tremendously. Terms. Terms are rules or conditions. Paul's mother laid down some terms that he would have to follow if he wanted to invite his friends over to play. Resist. If you resist something, you turn it down or say no to it. Daniel had to resist staying up too late to read his comic book because he needed to be rested for his test in the morning. Some antonyms for the word resist, or words that mean the opposite thing, might include allow, obey, agree, or accept. Long ago, in a peaceful little corner of Greece, there lived a king and a queen who loved each other very much. Although their kingdom was not large or wealthy, they and all their people lived happily. This king and queen had a daughter, a princess who was intelligent, beautiful, and a skilled huntress. She also happened to be the fastest runner in the world. Her name was Atalanta. When she reached a certain age, Atalanta's parents told her, "One day you will become queen, and ruling this land is too big a job for one person to do alone. It is time for you to marry." To their surprise, Atalanta replied, "I can ask wise men or women to help me run the country. As for a husband, perhaps I shall have one someday, but for now, there is no one whom I wish to marry." During the time in which this story takes place, unlike today, it was very uncommon or very rare for an adult to choose not to get married. Because of this, Atalanta's parents were very surprised by her statement that she didn't want to get married, but that decision would not cause the same reaction today. The queen asked her, "What about all those fine young men who come around asking to marry you? Surely there must be one." "They care nothing for me, mother," Atalanta replied. They only want to marry me in order to become king one day. But the king and queen insisted. Finally, Princess Atalanta said, "Very well, I shall marry the first unmarried man who can defeat me in a foot race." "What?" her parents exclaimed. They tried to talk her out of the idea, but they could not. So at last they agreed to her terms and sent word throughout the land. Do you think any man will be able to defeat Atalanta, the fastest runner in the world, in a race? As you might imagine, many young men came to race against the princess, hoping to marry her. She easily defeated every single one, enjoying herself tremendously. One day, after winning yet another race, she just kept running past the finish line for the sheer delight of it. She did not know that looking down from Mount Olympus that day was the goddess of love, Aphrodite. The goddess thought, "She is making a joke of love. I cannot allow this to go on." Aphrodite is pretty upset about Atalanta's behavior. What do you think she's going to do? Now at that same moment, a young man was walking along the same road upon which Atalanta was now running. The young man was a brave adventurer named Hippomenes. He was just returning from a long sea voyage, so he knew nothing of the princess's challenge. As Hippomenes walked along, he glanced ahead and saw the most beautiful young woman he had ever laid eyes on, running at his way at an unbelievable speed. It was Atalanta, of course, and as Hippomenes was looking at her, the goddess Aphrodite was looking at him. Turning to her son, Eros, Aphrodite said, "Go shoot an invisible arrow of love into Hippomenes' heart, so that he will fall in love with Atalanta." So Eros did as he was told, and Hippomenes instantly fell in love with Atalanta as she ran by him. He thought, "I have never seen such joy on a human face. I would not have thought it possible, but I believe that I have fallen in love with her." At once he began to pray to Aphrodite for help, which is what the goddess had planned all along. She appeared before Hippomenes and told him that he must outrace Atalanta if he wanted to marry her. "But this is impossible, my lady," Hippomenes told Aphrodite. "I am a very fast runner, but I have never seen anyone move as Atalanta does." The goddess presented Hippomenes with 3 apples made of purest gold that shone almost as brightly as the sun. "When Atalanta sees these apples, she will not be able to resist picking them up," Aphrodite said. "Here is what you must do." The next day, Hippomenes challenged Atalanta to a race. Inside his rather loose-fitting clothing, he had hidden the 3 golden apples. Before the race, he told Atalanta, "Your Highness, I want you to know why I am racing against you." Atalanta answered, "In order to marry a princess and become king someday." To her shock, he replied, "No, in order to marry the woman I love. She just happens to be a princess." Then he walked to the starting line, while Atalanta thought, "There is something different about this one." Still, she took her place next to him. A moment later, the race was on. Atalanta began to pull ahead almost at once, but Hippomenes drew one of the apples from inside his clothing and tossed it ahead of her, and a little off to the side. The moment Atalanta saw the apple, she had to have it. She turned and went after it. As she picked it up, she saw Hippomenes ahead of her, and losing no more time, she took off like a deer. Soon Hippomenes heard her footsteps closing in behind him. Drawing out apple number 2, he held it up so she would see it and tossed it back over his shoulder. She turned right around and ran back to get it while Hippomenes ran on. Grabbing the second apple, she saw Hippomenes halfway to the finish line. This time, Atalanta took after him like a speeding cheetah dashing across the grasslands. Soon Hippomenes could hear her rapid footsteps getting closer, and he took out apple number 3 and threw it into a nearby field of tall grass. Of course, Atalanta went after it, hunting through the grass for the golden fruit, while Hippomenes kept running. This one too she held in the palm of her hand as she returned to the race. In all of Atalanta's life, she had never run as fast as she ran then. Her feet seemed not to touch the ground. Faster and faster she moved, and closer to Hippomenes she came. He told himself, "Don't look back or you might lose a step." Now she was only 3 steps behind him, now 2 steps, now just 1, and then she thought to herself, "Would it be so terrible if I did marry him?" And as she had that thought, Hippomenes gained a step and crossed the finish line before her. What happened after that? Well, I am glad to say that Atalanta kept her word and married Hippomenes, and I am even gladder to say that she had been right. There was something different about him, and soon she loved him as much as he loved her. Hippomenes never minded that Atalanta could outrun him. He was happy just to be the one running with her.
All right, as always, I've got some questions about that story for you today. What made Atalanta special or different from others? Atalanta was a skilled huntress, a princess, and she was also the fastest runner in the world. How does Atalanta react to her parents' desire for her to get married? Was she happy about it? No, but she eventually agreed to marry someone on one condition. What was Atalanta's condition? She said she would only marry someone who could beat her in a foot race. Why do you think that she gave her parents those conditions or terms? That condition or term? She's the fastest person in the world, right? So she thinks no one will be able to beat her. So she won't ever have to get married. So she wasn't really agreeing to getting married. She was trying to trick her parents. Why do you think that Aphrodite, the goddess of love, didn't like those terms that Atalanta said? As the goddess of love, I think Aphrodite wants people to fall in love and to get married. So with Atalanta's refusal to do so, it made Aphrodite upset. Hippomenes finally beats Atalanta in the foot race. How was he able to do it? How did he beat her? You're right, that's where our golden apples came into our story. He used the golden apples to distract her and slow her down so that he could beat her in the race. At the end of the myth, is Atalanta tremendously happy or sad that she lost the race and married him? She's very happy at the end. That one has a very happy ending. All right, my friends, today we are going to finish up our Greek myths that we are working on with our last step in the writing process, which is to publish. Go ahead and open up the PDF attached to this assignment, as well as your edited rough draft, and I'll tell you what our publishing step will look like.
All right, so far we have planned a Greek myth, we've written a draft for a Greek myth, and we've revised and edited our draft. For today's assignment, you will need your revised and edited draft, your copy of your work from our last lesson. Today we are going to do our final step in the writing process, publishing. When we publish, we take our rough drafts with all of our changes that we made, and we copy it onto a new piece of paper so that it looks neat and organized. So today your assignment is going to be to copy all of the information on your rough draft and all of the changes that you made onto this blank paper. When you are done, go ahead and turn this one in, and that is your only assignment for the day.